Greetings in Jesus' name this morning. It is good to be here with you all, and good to see everyone that's here this morning. This morning I'm going to talk about something I'm in the middle of right now in life. It's about children, and or more precisely, becoming as children. I'm going to be reading from Matthew 18, the first 14 verses. I was reading or listening to a book recently, and one thing that stuck out to me that the author said, he was talking about the parable of the lost sheep, and I guess I had always understood, if one sheep goes astray, that the shepherd would leave the 99 in the fold and go after this one. Well, what I didn't realize, and it stuck out to me this time differently than ever before, is how he was actually in the middle of talking about children and becoming as a child and receiving a child. So that's what I want to talk about this morning a little bit. I'm going to be reading from Matthew 18, the first 14 verses. At that time the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Then Jesus called a little child to him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, "Assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because of offenses, for offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom the offense comes. If your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life lame or maimed, rather than having two hands or 2 feet to be cast into the everlasting fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life with one eye, rather than having two eyes to be cast into hellfire. Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I say to you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. For the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 and go to the mountains to seek the one that is straying? And if he should find it, assuredly I say to you, he rejoices more over that sheep than over the 99 that did not go astray. Even so, it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish." It was difficult to study this because I'm just going to start off with that and then I'm going to charge into it. It's difficult to study something like this because I see all of the things that I can improve in and that I need to work on. With that being said, I'm going to dive in and we'll talk about it. Who is the greatest? And what does it mean to be the greatest? I think we can all agree that the greatness in the kingdom of heaven does not follow earthly standards. It's not about who has the most power, who has the most money, who has the most influence. Jesus says, you've got it backwards. You think in terms of what you have accomplished. You need to change your mindset. You've got it all backwards. You're thinking like this, but it's not like that at all. It's like this. Become like this little child. Look at this child. He has no influence. He's weak. He has no authority or power. He just loves his daddy. And he knows he depends on him, and he delights in him. He wants to follow him around. He doesn't even think about himself compared to others. He doesn't think that I'm smarter or I'm more handsome, or he doesn't think about any of that. Until you get to a certain age, of course. He just thinks about how wonderful his daddy is. You must change and become like that if you're to enter the kingdom of heaven. What does it mean to humble yourself and become as little children? Humility hang on a second. Humility is not an emotion. That's one thing that I realized in studying this. It's really not an emotion. It's a mindset. It's a mindset of unconcern for social status, of putting others first. There's a pastor named John Keller. He tells this story about Ulysses S. Grant. In the winter of 1863, General Ulysses S. Grant was promoted to lieutenant general. It was a permanent promotion that had previously only been given to George Washington. So there had been no other lieutenant general up until that. Grant's military success in the Mississippi River Valley during the Civil War had earned him this distinct promotion. Through the early years of the war, he had never been to Washington, D.C., nor met President Lincoln. But in December of 1863, he was called to Washington to receive his promotion and to command the entire Union Army. Grant had reached the very top of the military ladder, and a splendid reception was planned. It was a big deal, like the biggest deal. When Grant arrived in Washington that morning, no one was there to greet him at the train station. He and his son walked to a nearby hotel to book a room. The hotel clerk looked at this dusty, unkempt military officer and said, "You can have that room. There's a small upstairs room. You can have that one." Grant said, "Yeah, that's fine. No problem. That'll be acceptable." And he signed the guest register. The hotel clerk saw the signature, Ulysses S. Grant, and was pretty ashamed. He tried to change the hotel arrangements. Grant said, "No, I don't care. That's fine. I just need a room." If anything, humility is not... Oh, sorry. Okay, that's where we are. If anything, humility is not so much an emotion as an absence of emotion. He didn't feel slighted. He wasn't peeved that he didn't get instant recognition and respect from the hotel clerk. He did not see himself as superior. I'm not up here. He didn't feel like that. I'm not superior to the hotel clerk, or look down on him in contempt and think that he had earned something, or that this person owed him some sort of recognition. He was obviously the superior general to the hotel clerk, but that superiority did not dictate how he treated the clerk or anyone else in his daily affairs. There's other stories too. Just in reading about Ulysses S. Grant, I read another story about where there was a reception planned. It might have even been at the same time. And President Lincoln was going to throw this big party for him. And he was like, I got to get back to work. Like, I don't care about this. I've got work to do. I've got to get moving. That would be a great honor, yes. Mrs. Lincoln, I appreciate that you were going to have me for dinner, but I got to get moving. I've got to go back to work. So what age was Jesus talking about? Just in thinking about children, obviously there are some qualities of young children that are not commendable, that they need to learn, that we all have learned, hopefully, more or less. So 2 years old is a lot different than 10 years old, for instance. There are 3 major stages in early childhood development. The first one is noticing emotions, birth to 1 year. They see when you're happy, they see when you're sad. The second one is expressing emotions from 2 to 3 years old. And then the third one is managing emotions from 3 to 5 years old. I'm going to focus on ages 2 to 3. The Bible doesn't state the age of this child, but that is a stage of innocence that has a lot of things we can learn from. When I think of what a child is like, that's what I think of when the Bible talks about a child. I think of enthusiasm. No child obviously is excited all the time, but they haven't learned yet to hide their emotions, they haven't learned to hide their questions, their ideas. They haven't learned to be too ashamed to ask for help. And often we see these traits as things to grow out of. Well, you shouldn't ask so many questions. You shouldn't show your emotions. You shouldn't have so many, you shouldn't this, shouldn't that. How are children different than adults? I want to look at a few things here. First of all, children are learning, they're growing, they're passionate, they're excited. They scream, they yell, they dance, they make a lot of noise. Adults, on the other hand, at least, again, I'm talking to myself here this morning, we're cynical. We tend to lose this curiosity, this wonder and fascination as we grow older. Children are honest. They haven't learned yet to hide their emotions and pain. They're vulnerable, they're open, they're transparent. If there's something going on, they're going to tell you, especially in that age range of 2 to 3 years old. Adults, we like to keep up appearances. I care what I wear, I care how I look, everything is good, I'm doing well. How are you doing? I'm good. Children ask questions. They haven't been trained to be ashamed to ask for help. They haven't learned that yet. They trust that you know all the answers. That's one thing that's been really challenging for Brittany and I, is that the children, they trust that they ask a question and it can be the most, it's a huge question. Something to do with heaven or death or life or marriage, or these big questions they come up with that, well, we're like, well, how is this going to happen? Well, I don't know. And they're like, how do you not know? Like, you know everything. Well, no, I don't. But they're not afraid to ask those questions. Adults, on the other hand, we're spiritually mature. I had that in quotes. We're afraid to ask the difficult and messy questions. We have baggage around certain topics that makes it awkward to talk about them. Children don't have that baggage, and they can innocently ask questions that'll make you blush. And they're okay with a simple answer, too. It's not like they're looking for a complicated answer. They just want a simple answer. I've heard it said before, actually, the more intelligent the person, it might be more emotional intelligence too, but the more intelligent the person, the simpler their answers should be. You can use a lot of big words, but if you can't put it in words that your audience can understand, then you're not actually communicating well. Children are adventurous. They haven't had the hurts and failures that adults have. They don't know that if you jump off the roof, it's going to hurt. They don't know that if you run out in the street, you're going to get hurt. That you've got to watch for cars, and that's why a lot of things happen. They go places they're not supposed to. They talk to people they aren't supposed to. They take risks. Adults, on the other hand, are logical. We're safe. We're calculated. We're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and it's all going to go like that. But following Jesus was never meant to be like that. He does say count the cost. I should say it's definitely not logical from the world's perspective. If we do it right, we're surrendering everything. Children forgive. They might be fighting one minute and be best friends the next. They can turn around and be playing. 5 minutes, they're done crying. It's 5 minutes later. Okay, we'll go back to playing now. We're fine. Adults, on the other hand, we hold grudges. We gossip, and we fight. And we don't let it go. We hang on to it. How many times have you been talking about something where you knew that there were things under the surface that nobody was really willing to talk about? And then we go away from there and we talk about it afterwards with the people who agree with us, with the people who think like us. Children are trusting. They run up to strangers with no hesitation. They don't hold anything back. How often have you given candy to children and seen them turn around and give most of it to their friends? Like, I have some, you should too. In fact, often they'll ask for, can I have more pieces to give to everybody? Obviously, they recognize where they're getting it from. And we should be the same. They have short attention spans and they move on from disappointment more quickly than me. Adults, on the other hand, we have boundaries. This is mine, and this is yours. You have yours and I'll have mine. If you want more, go get it yourself. All it takes, this is really all it's tied into humility. All it takes is one person to break the ice and take on humility to start that trend. Are you that person? Am I that person? Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. This is a little bit difficult one to figure out exactly what that means, but what does it mean to receive? How do we receive a little child in his name? Do we take the time to know the children around us? Am I building relationships with them, or am I just letting them take care of themselves? Well, they're free-range kids. We'll let them do that. Obviously, we can't be helicopter either. That's a term that came out a couple years ago. Do I pay enough attention to them that I know when they're hurting, that I know what they need? I'm going to contrast verse 5 with verse 6. In what ways, what are ways we offend? In what ways do we cause a child to stumble? Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, he says, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea. What are ways that we offend, and how can we avoid those? I kind of broke this down into two different sections. First of all, there's deliberate actions and attitudes and things that people do. Hopefully none of us do this. None of us really wants to hurt anyone. But there are those out there who are so warped that it's intentional. People who intentionally try to twist and destroy. The spirit of this world is constantly trying to steal our children, and that has to be watched for and guarded against. But sometimes it's even more dangerous, the things that we do unknowingly. If there are inconsistencies in the way that, between the things that we say and do, it's something that's really been on my heart lately, is acknowledging our inconsistencies. Am I really doing what I say I'm doing? When I go home this afternoon, am I going to be the same person that I am up here? Those inconsistencies that can drive our children away, can drive people away if they see us not living up to what we say. Have we allowed God to change what's actually on the inside? God doesn't require us to be perfect. This is the same with he expects perfection, but at the same time he requires us to get better, to keep making progress. I need to get better. You need to get better. We need to continue following God and acknowledging our inconsistencies and the things that we do, finding the things that we do unknowingly and looking for those. There is a song by a group called DC Talk from years and years ago. The song title is What If I Stumble? And it starts off with a person reading or speaking. He says, the greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and then they walk out that door and deny him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelieving. Now think about that for a minute. The single greatest cause of atheism is Christians. If we do offend children or people, how do we win them back? Do we acknowledge our faults? Do we ask for forgiveness? Do we admit when we're wrong? I'm going to read a section from a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was given to me years ago, and I never actually read it until recently. It was by Stephen Covey. He talks about emotional bank account, about basically preparing the path for restoration for when you do offend. He tells the story. He says, we have accounts with each other, and our actions either make deposits or withdrawals from that account. We're either adding to it or we're taking away from it. Every action you every action you do, everything you say, something corresponds to that. He tells this story. I was in my office at home one afternoon writing, of all things, on the subject of patience. You can see where this is going. I could hear the boys running up and down the hall making loud banging noises, and I could feel my own patience beginning to wane. Suddenly, my son David started pounding on the bathroom door, yelling at the top of his lungs, "Let me in! Let me in!" He was pounding on the bathroom door, not the office door. I caught that after reading it several times. I rushed out of my office and spoke to him with great intensity. "David, do you have any idea how disturbing that is to me? Do you know how hard it is to try to concentrate and write creatively? Now you go into your room and you stay in there until you can behave yourself." So he went in, dejected, and he shut the door. As I turned around, I became aware of another problem. The boys had been playing tackle football in the 4-foot-wide hallway, and one of them had been elbowed in the mouth. He was lying there in the hall, bleeding from his mouth. David, I discovered, had gone to the bathroom to get a wet towel for him, but his sister Maria was taking a shower at the time and couldn't open the door. When I realized that I had completely misinterpreted the situation and had overreacted, I immediately went in to David's room to apologize. As I opened the door, the first thing he said to me was, "I won't forgive you." "Well, why not, son?" I said. "Honestly, I didn't realize you were trying to help your brother. Why won't you forgive me?" "Because you did the same thing last week," he said. In other words, he was saying, "Dad, you were overdrawn and you're not going to talk your way out of a problem you behaved yourself into." Sincere apologies make deposits. Repeated apologies, on the other hand, that are interpreted as insincere make withdrawals. And the quality of the relationship reflects it. It is one thing to make a mistake and another thing to not admit it. People will forgive mistakes because mistakes are usually of the mind, usually the mistakes of judgment, but people will not easily forgive the mistakes of the heart, the ill intentions, the bad motives, the prideful justifying cover-up of the first mistake. So are my actions making withdrawals or deposits? Has God really changed me? Does my life show progress? For offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom the offense comes. I do like the New King James because it's a little bit clearer, but the King James is definitely still comes through from time to time in verses like this. If God is real, how can bad things happen? That's a question we hear a lot, and I know we all know the tried and true answer, but it's still a question that has to be asked and that is asked. The results of sin are real. Until Christ returns and he purges the earth, there will be consequences of sin here. It's a fact of life in this fallen world that there will be sin, and sin causes pain and suffering. We all have choices to make about how we act and how we respond to things. But we need to be the redeemers, the healers, the doctors who help right the wrongs and walk with the hurting. We need to show them what it means to follow Jesus. If your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. Now we get to this stuff, this fun verse. If your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life lame or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into the everlasting fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire. How far are you willing to go to save your soul? Why does nobody actually do this? My first question. Why aren't all of us blind, lame, or maimed, or armless? How do we apply this? Is Jesus talking about making a set of rules to keep us safe? Is he talking about actually physically doing this? Or, just looking at the context, is he talking telling us to be aware of how our actions affect us and others. Remember, he's in the middle of talking about offenses. Do I grumble and complain and refuse to work with others, or do I say encouraging things? Which side of that am I? Am I grumbling or am I encouraging? Do I speak harshly to my children? Do I walk with integrity? Do I practice what I preach? Am I concerned enough about sin that I will take drastic measures to protect myself and others? What about to protect my children and the children of others? The one area, there's a few areas I'll talk about. The one area that obviously comes to mind is technology. I love technology. It feels, to me it feels strange to be up here. I set my phone out, I don't have my wallet on me, my pockets are completely empty. That feels very strange because I walk around at work all day and I have things in my pockets. If I need to call someone, I can. If I need advice, I can send a message and ask for help. It's just me up here today. Well, and my laptop with my notes on it, I guess. There's no technology that can prepare you for this, just a heads up for all of you. What would I do to protect my children and the children of others? One thing we can apply, so technology. We are living in an unprecedented age of technology. Things that we never thought would be a thing are now everywhere. Just kind of out of curiosity, I went through and made a whole timeline and I trimmed it out of here for the sake of time. You're welcome. Today, you have infinite choices of what to put in front of your eyes or your ears. Is it good for you or is it junk food? 100 years ago, they barely had a telephone. And now, there are so many other things that you can put in front of your eyes. I think even like television was invented in the 1920s. I think there were moving pictures before that, but you couldn't broadcast yet. It used to be easy to just say no radio, no television. Those were one way. It was just one way information streams. But now we have the internet. We have all kinds of other things on there. It's very intertwined with our lives to the point where it's basically, I mean, there are people who do it who are so off the grid that doesn't affect them, but it's basically impossible to live without it unless you have someone else do it for you. That's the other option. But it's impossible to not be touched by it. And I am not suggesting, for the record, all of you know I love technology, I love new things. I'm not suggesting we should dig a hole and hide from technology, but are we safeguarding ourselves and those we are responsible? Am I making good choices for my family? If I told you that you needed to give up one thing to keep your children from going to hell, would you? Would you do it? Most of us, I think all of us, would go so far as to jump in front of a train to save a child, even a child that's not ours, or even another person, an adult. But will I make the long sacrifice of giving up something that I enjoy or treasure? What are you allowing in your home? What do we spend our time or energy on? Are we living a selfless life? What activities do we spend our time on? Are we filling our lives with good activities, or are they selfish? Is it about me and the fun I can have, or is it about helping others? Our children see that. The people around us see that. One thing that's interesting in this passage, he does flip back and forth between, he's talking about children, then he talks about adults, and he talks about children, and he talks about adults. And it's very, very much about those around us. Relationships. Do we spend our time on our friends and family or on those who cannot repay us? This is one I can't claim to be doing well. I know I can do better than this. Do I know my neighbors? I know one of them. But do I know the rest of them? Do I know their names? Would I even recognize them if I ran into them at the store in town? In Luke 14, Jesus was in the house of, too far. He was in the house of one of the Pharisees on the Sabbath, And he also said to him who invited him, "When you give a dinner or supper, do not ask your friends, your brothers, your relatives, nor your rich neighbors, lest they also invite you back, and you be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. For you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just." Attitudes. Other things that can get in our way are stubbornness, pride, or talking badly about our neighbors or our church or people at work. And children see and hear everything. Why would I want to be a Christian if that's the way they act? We can run them off. We can run people off. We can run children off if they see us spending time and energy fighting over things that ultimately don't matter. People want stability, even if they themselves don't know how to make it happen. And they see that. If they see instability, they don't like that. Usually, unless they really do like it. Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones. The word despise means overlook or discount the importance of, ignore, to look down on with disrespect or aversion. One way that we can do this, children can test our patience. How many times do I have to tell you? I'm a little bit too good at that, you can tell. Their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. They have God's attention. It's very clear that they do. They should not be overlooked. All of us, whether we are parents or aunts or uncles or older siblings, we all have influence over the children in our lives. How much are your children worth? You only have one shot at training them. Only one shot at raising them. You can course correct, you can reserve the right to make a better decision tomorrow, but the path you have taken and are taking will determine a lot about the child's future. It's the most formative years. For the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost. All of us have a sin nature that drives a wedge between us and God. God wants each of us back so much that he sent his Son to save us, to save you. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 and go to the mountains to seek the one that is straying? At work, we would be thrilled if we had 99% efficiency, but God is not okay with 99% efficiency. He's not okay with that. Am I okay with that? For most of us, we'd be okay if we lost 1% of our bank account. It might make us blink and call an 800 number and complain a little bit, but maybe not even that. I'm sure I'm not alone in forgetting a subscription, forgetting to cancel it, and it cost me a few extra dollars for an extra month because I forgot to cancel it. But every soul matters to God. And it should to us too. Every child, every man or woman we meet at work or at the store, every person has infinite value to God. And do we treat it as such? So three challenges I want to leave with myself and with you. What do you need to change to become as a child? Don't just be good. I'm good. Don't do that. Become as a child. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. Obviously, that's a longer conversation. It's easy to say good and move on, but let's have the conversation. Make sure that you are talking, that you are vulnerable. What measures do you need to take in your life to safeguard yourself and the little ones around you? Is there something I am allowing in my life that will cause someone else to stumble? How is God working through you? Are you allowing him to control your life, or are you holding something back? I invite you to think about that and to pray about it, those questions. Let's stand for prayer. Dear God, thank you for meeting us here this morning. Thank you for your word and for the direction that you give us. Pray that you would be with me and with each one here. Help us to serve you and help us to follow you more closely each day. Pray that you'd help us to have the right attitudes and the right actions. Help us to build each other up and to truly serve you and serve others around us. Pray that you would be with us as we go from here, and just invite you to change us, to help us to seek you. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated.